So when he woke up and he was stressed out and he said he was going through it, I didn't respond to him. But he added, this makes me not even want to go to sleep. Now, at the time, I understood what he said sort of viscerally in my own body. I really didn't respond to him. I didn't really need to respond. It didn't really require a response. I understood what it meant to not want to go to sleep, but also to have terrible sleep. As I said, I was not sleeping myself. This time, I started grad school. I started grad school in the fall of 2006. And I'd been arrested right at the start of graduate school before I knew Seth. And so I got out. And I thought this is going to be a one-time thing. I was there for like 8 hours. And I thought to myself, this is just a moment in my history. I will move on. And statistically, I was past the point at which people normally are arrested anyway. So I was like, this is way too late in my life to be getting arrested. I'm about to start grad school. This is just a moment. But then I got rearrested 3 more times. And finally, I just withdrew from the University of California. It's like, I'm not going to be able, I can't go to court every day, every week, and go to seminar every day, every week. I couldn't do both. And I was a single parent. So raising my son, trying to manage that with graduate school, trying to manage going to court. And it's just too many different things to balance all at the same time. And at the same time, while the court case is sort of going on, the university is investigating me. So in the end, I get expelled, I get kicked out of my family housing, and I end up serving jail time. Now, initially, the amount of jail time that I was getting, I was being offered years in prison. And so I wasn't overly excited about that, you can imagine. But in the end, I accepted a plea deal and got a 180-day sentence, of which I had to do 120 consecutively. But by this point, I had already done another 14 days, so I did a 134 altogether. I didn't plan on doing a study when I first got to jail. I remember not being interested in it at all. When I was in graduate school, I did not care about crime. I wasn't studying crime or punishment or anything like that. I was interested in pure theory or in social psych. So that's what the University of California, that's what my department sort of was strong in. So I was studying those things. But after about a week or so of being there, and I had thought that I was going to get out. Now, everyone was told, I later learned, it was told the same thing I was told. My public defender said to me, you'll be out in about 3 days. And I was first telling everybody, I'm not going to be here. I'll be out in about 3 days. And I remember becoming the butt of everyone's jokes, like, you ain't going nowhere. Everyone is told that. I was told that 4 years ago. Mind you, I didn't know you could be in jail for 4 years. I didn't know you could be in jail for 9 years. I didn't know you could be in jail for 14 years. But I also thought I was going to be out in 3 days. But after about a week, I kind of accepted I'm not really actually going anywhere. No one's coming to get me. And that shift changed the way that I understood myself while I was there. At first, I was just writing because what else am I going to be doing? There's nothing else for me to do. So I wrote how I felt. I wrote about my personal experiences. I analyzed myself. I only had a year of graduate school under my belt, so it wasn't like I was a scholar by any standards. But, I'm a nerd like most of us, and I'm sort of a kind of person who's going to pay attention to what I see around. I think most of us who go into sociology probably were already in sociology in one way or another in our lives. So I just did that. And I kept those notes kind of like, this is how I see myself. Full of shame, full of embarrassment, all kinds of arguments about how crazy of a terrible of a person I am, really self-deprecating stuff, but then also some stuff that began to sort of like pay attention to what's going on. And I remember Ellen Reese, who became my dissertation chair, told me the night before I went in, she said, pay attention to what you see. Mind you, I didn't even know Ellen Reese. Like, I knew who she was in the department, but we weren't working together. So I thought this is an exploitive moment for her because I didn't know her. She didn't need me for anything. She didn't need me. She was offering good advice at the time, but we had never had a conversation before. But I did take that advice, not necessarily because I thought I'm going to turn this into a study and write a book one day, but because what the hell else am I doing? So I kept these notes separately. I wrote how I felt, and then I started asking more broadly sociological ideas. I don't know about this place. Why is it, why does it organize the way it is? So I kept 2 sets of field notes. And in doing it this way, sometimes I would have to write things twice because I would write about what I saw, what I observed. Here's what happened. Here's the sort of patterns of social relations that matter. And then here's how I felt about them. And this is a way of sort of, I didn't know that this was a method that existed. It just seemed like a natural way of doing things. It's not a way that I would train my students to do things if they were doing ethnography because it was incredibly time consuming, but I'm in jail. So what else am I going to do? And in doing it that way, eventually it became this book. This book, I put A lot of heart and soul in this book. I think we all do when we're doing our work. Very few of us are just publishing just crap on purpose. But this book isn't necessarily just about jail. It's much more about human relations, the kinds of social patterns that structure a lot of what we do in our lives, the way that people go about dealing with difficult circumstances and how they make sense of that. Today, though, I just want to talk about one sort of piece of this, and this idea of this issue around dreams. Now, when I first got to jail, I did start writing down what I was dreaming, but only because I was dreaming things that I had never dreamt before. So one dream I had, I was still grown, but I was in my childhood home in Texas. I was in El Paso on 3115B Townsley Avenue. I remember the address, strangely enough. And my mother was looking for her bingo dots. She used to go play bingo all the time. And she couldn't find them. She was running around through the house. I was grown, but I was in there with my son somehow. I was like grown and as a child at the same. You know how dreams work. You can't make sense. They don't have to make sense. You're like, your brain is piecing together all these ideas. And I remember telling her, don't go play bingo. Something bad is going to happen. And then this sort of scene switch, and I'm discovering my son, and he's in some water. I'm not sure if it's a tub or if I'm outside. I'm in a pool. We didn't own a pool, or we weren't even near a pool, but he's dead, and I'm holding him. And I'm running out into like the street, and now it's nighttime. And I wake up. What wakes me ultimately is not the rain that I'm dreaming about, but it's the tears running down my own cheek. And I had never really had super visceral dreams like that before. I had never had dreams like, I haven't had dreams like that since. And I had a lot of similar kinds of dreams. And I started after a little while, starting to document like, why am I having these kinds of dreams? Just as a note of context here, before I went to jail, I was, a single father, as I said, but I'm also the first in my family to earn any kind of degree in anything. And there's a lot riding on my success. I remember feeling like I need to do well here. I need to have a good showing here. It mattered a lot to me to be able to say I'm doing all right. But when I went to jail, I started to note that my dreams started to organize in these kinds of themes, right? I had a lot of shame for having been in jail. There was professors who had invested in me, who said, man, you're smart, you could do this. And now I'm in jail. I had family members who was like, oh, see, I knew you weren't gonna be shit, and now you're not, right? Now you're in jail, right? I had my perception of how others perceive me, even when I hadn't said anything, was that I was taking this major loss. And I had all this fear about what it meant to be where I was. Because at this point, I didn't know anybody who had gone to jail after going to grad school and then went on to become a professor. I still don't know anybody else who's done that. I'm sure someone else, that person exists, right? Maybe John Irwin, right? I don't know when he went to jail. But my dreams started to clump around these types of clusters. What I found, though, it wasn't just me. I used to go to church in the jail, not because I cared about church necessarily, but because it's a way to get out of the jail cell, right? It's a gathering. And I remember in one particular time, this guy was describing a dream that he had recurrently. He kept saying, he's like, I'm pinned against the wall and there's dogs barking and serpents striking. That's how he said it, serpents striking at me. And as we're listening, other people started saying, yeah, I had that kind of dream. I have a dream just like that. I dreamed though that same kind of idea. I'm being chased, I'm being attacked. I'm on some kind of crazy revenge mission to save somebody and never quite there. I'm always waking up in sweats. I'm always stressed out in my dreams. My dreams are similar to this kind of dream. My daydreams are similar to kind of the daydreams that you're talking about. And what I realized over time was like, okay, so there's something to this. It's not just me, right? It never is really. So there's a kind of sets of dreams that are rooted in the organizational context in which you find yourself. Here, dreams can be organized in a kind of based upon, being incarcerated. Everyone talks about feeling some moment of shame or anger or regret or loss. Maybe rage is even better than anger as a way of understanding. This issue of fear. What happens if all of my social relations are dissolved or disrupted? What happened? How am I supposed to fix all these things that I've done wrong? So these kinds of dreams can be clumped, and you'll find these in different kinds of organizational settings. The intensity and the frequency, of course, will change. But the fact that dreams themselves can be tied to the organizational setting, that to me seems like an obvious thing now. At the time, I would never have thought like this is a thing that could occur. But let me just say, everybody in this place is having similar kinds of dreams. There's another kind of set of dreams that I also wasn't having. I remember talking with my my cellie and arguing with him about actually all kinds of stuff. We used to argue all the time about everything. But in one case, he finally decided to go get some help, right? He's like, I'm not sleeping. I need to go get some help. He goes to mental health. He has some kind of discussion. He says they gave him some pills, whatever they gave him. He comes back and he says, now I'm not having any dreams. And he was distressed about that. He was like, I'd go to sleep and I just wake up and I don't feel rested. And I argued against him because I remember reading at some point somewhere, I thought I did at least, that we always dream whether we remember it or not. I don't know if I was right or not. I could be dead ass wrong. But I argued against him that I was right? Because I don't know, because I was arrogant. I have no idea, right? And so I made this argument. I was like, no, man, you always do dream. I promise you. I think I saw this on Discovery Channel or something. And he's like, no, I'm not dreaming. He was distressed that he wasn't having any dreams. Then another gentleman chimes in. He's like, well, I don't know about not dreaming or not. He's like, but I'm so rested that now I'm running out of things to dream about. I'm not dreaming about anything. He's like, I'm just sitting up and I'm just awake. And even when I go to sleep, I feel like I haven't gone to sleep. I feel awake. I'm not tired. I'm not restless. I don't have any content to pull from. I had this one dream at one point in which I hadn't heard this song in I don't know how many years. So I dreamed that I was wearing Timberland boots. So I assumed that I was in New York. That's a very New York style of boot. So I just assumed I was in New York, right? And I had only been to New York one time before this. And I was standing outside of this fence that's actually on Crenshaw in LA, outside of this school, but I'm in New York. And these like group of black like brothers walk up and all of a sudden, so near this fence is also like a brownstone. So like we're on a stoop. And I remember they just all break out in this like choreographed dance to Come and Talk to Me by Jodeci. So go listen to the song, the remix, if you've never heard it. So they just start dancing. And I remember thinking, I don't know the dance. I'm supposed to know the dance and I don't know the dance. And when I woke up, I just felt ashamed of myself. It's like, why don't I even know this dance? But more importantly, I thought to myself, I haven't heard this song in forever. I've been to New York once. My brain was like piecing together any little scraps of information, it felt like, and just stitching together these new ideas. There's no new content coming in. There's no new, like in free society, we live through a torrent of society, a torrent of media. We don't have that when you're in jail. This is why people would get this earworm. You'd be singing the Cars for Kids song forever. 1-800-CARS for Kids. If you never heard that song, don't go listen. You won't be able to forget it. People singing Rockwell. I always feel like people, somebody's watching me over and over and over again. Me and another cellmate, we used to recite lines from the movie Marked for Death by, who's in that movie? That terrible actor. I can't think of his name right now. He does like Aikido. Doesn't even matter. So don't go watch the movie. It's awful. But if you saw it in the 80s when it first came out, then you love it. If you didn't see it, don't go watch it. You're wasting your time. But what I started to experience was this sort of deprivation dreams. But it wasn't just me. Everybody's talking about like what they're not seeing, the kinds of dreams they're not having. When I'm in academia and I'm noodling with an idea, I'm reading some paper and trying to make sense of it, I'll go to sleep. And oftentimes when I wake up, I'll have the next line that I'm going to write. And that'll help propel me forward. In jail, no. I'm not getting that at all. I'm just deprived of any kind of content that would help my mind sort of work through things. Instead, all of my dream content is just negative, right? It just forces me to sort of want to go inward. Now, that's not the only issue though. At some point, my cellmate and I were talking about this, me and Scott, and he says to me, he's like, man, I just can't get comfortable. And I'm like, yeah, me neither. And he's like, but that's the point though. You're not supposed to get comfortable. I'm like, yeah, I agree. You're not supposed to be, it's not hard to do, but I want you to know. So those are metal slabs that you're sleeping on, right? That give you mats. The mats are about this thick. It's foam, right? Like foam that you would use if you're like cleaning like sponges that you use to wash your dishes. So if you turn over, there'd be your elbow like boom on metal, right? So you'd wake up and you'd have, the blood be shunted from one leg. So in the mornings at 4:30, when everyone's eating breakfast, no one sits down, everyone stands at the tables, and you see people groaning and moving and shaking. No one talks. In fact, if you talk too much during breakfast, you're likely to be shunned for this. Like, how dare we're in too much pain to be talking to you. No one's even going to be sociable until much later on in the afternoon. And in the mornings, you spend time just dealing with the pain, the physical pain of trying to sleep. Also, the lights never go out under any circumstances. And so the lights are literally, so if you're in the top bunk, this is how close the lights are to you. If you're on the bottom bunk, if you're somebody, you have a good relationship with this person, you can use the sheets and dangle your sheets from the top bunk across so you can have some sort of, get a little dimmer light. But now it's always cold in the cells too. So you got to decide, do you want to be cold or do you want the light out? You can try to sleep with your oranges, like you take off your county oranges. You're not supposed to sleep in them anyways. It's considered to be, quote, dirtbag behavior. So you sleep in your boxers and your t-shirt, you're going to be cold. I stayed in a Marine base in Kadena in Okinawa, and they give you this little like green burlap blanket, for lack of a way of describing it. It feels like burlap on your skin. I guess to like toughen Marines up, I have no idea. But so it comes right here on me. So I can decide to crunch and try to cover myself. I can cover my bottom half or I can cover my top, but I can't be covered completely. I can try to take off my orange top and tie it over my eyes and try to sleep with that. But if you ever try to sleep with something tied over your face, it's not exactly comfortable. And there's no pillow, of course. So you try to use your tops and your bottoms as a pillow too. So it's cold. The lights are always on. It is the most immiserating form of sleep I've ever experienced, right? At any time. So this is what it's like to sleep in a two-man cell, but I've also been in the dormitory style housing units. Strangely enough, the same people who can be housed in the dorm, like the two-man cells, can also be housed in the dormitory. I've been in both. The classification does not change, but in the dormitory style, the lights do go off. One of those sort of like, ask the deputy why they do it this way, they don't have an answer, all right? But you're 3 to a cell, or 3 to a bunk. So if you're in the middle bunk or the bottom bunk, the argument is that you should just, or if you're on the top bunk, you should stay on the top bunk. So what will happen is at 4:30 in the morning, when breakfast is served, the lights stay on until about 10:30 at night. And so most people don't even get off their bunk most of the day, right? So most of the day you're laying there. If you're on the top bunk, especially you lay there because it's considered to be rude to have to keep going up and down. When I was a child, my mother would say this, either be in or out, right? If you're gonna go outside, go outside. If you're gonna be inside, stay inside. It's a similar kind of argument here with regard to, but it's just here inside the housing unit. It smells like what you can imagine it may smell like, right? Sort of like old milk and old meat, right? Everyone's diet is the same. Everyone's level of exercise is basically the same. This is the nature of cloistered organizations, that it is a homogenizing set of processes. We're trying to make you more and more alike. And the more cloistered the organization, the greater the degree of homogenization, and the more you start to get these kinds of things that used to be very different in every society, like a free society, that become more the same. Like mortality rates, you'll see, are more the same for people who are incarcerated. You find the same thing in other kinds of cloister studies with regard to people who live in convents. But sleep, of course, is immiserating. It's not just that it's physically painful or even that it's sort of, cognitively distressing. But here are just some of the physiological problems that develop if you have poor sleep hygiene. Mind you, there's an interesting set of relationships here. So if you have any of these things, you may have poor sleep hygiene. But independent of these things, if you have poor sleep hygiene, then you increase your risk for these things. Suicide is the #1 cause of death in American jails, followed by heart disease. 2 things that are absolutely on this list. And it is not strange to me that you would see all of these things occurring to people who are incarcerated. Of course, it couldn't be any other way. We've organizationally set it up to be this way. So it should not be shocking at all. What is most interesting to me, maybe not most, but another sort of interesting point about all of this is, then this sort of leads to this broader stratification of sleep hygiene in American society. There's 10 million, admissions annually in American county jails. 10 million. It's kind of gone down here and there. I think at the height, it was like 14 million. Now it's like 7 or 8, so give it, just depending upon what year. But this is one of the largest people processing institutions in American society. So if, to the extent that you have the same kinds of people going in and out, same race, class, degree of marginality in American society, you see sleep hygiene be increasingly stratified across American society, if we choose to look, if we choose to study that. So what do we do? At one point, I was dealing with poor sleep, and I remember thinking to myself, well, I'm too tall, too black, and too much of a man to go talk to mental health. And then an older, sort of high status resident there, I refer to these people as penal residents. We can talk about why another time if you ask. But he said to me, everybody at some point goes to mental health. He's like, everybody goes. And he said, everybody goes for sleep. So I felt free then, like, oh, okay, I can go talk to this person and just see what happens, like just to get some kind of help. So I decided to go. There's 3 mental health workers. There is a doctor who I call Dr. Cross. I can't remember what name I gave him in the book, but in my mind, it's always Dr. Cross. There's Nurse B, and then there's another nurse who, it was so sort of incognito, I just never even had an interaction with her, and no one ever even spoke of her. So I had no idea like what it was like to have an interaction with her. Dr. Cross was known for not liking, the resident. He seemed almost antagonistic towards us. He just didn't, maybe he hated his job, I have no idea, but he didn't seem like he wanted to be there, and he made it very clear. Nurse B, not Nurse B, but the other nurse, who sort of the nameless nurse, well, she's nameless for a reason. But Nurse B, everyone had an interaction with her, and everyone loved Nurse B. We all love Nurse B. So when you go down to mental health, what would happen is you'd be called from your housing unit, and you'd line up at the Sally Port, and then a deputy would walk you down to the mental health holding cells. There's usually like 3 of them. Across, so we assume if these are the units in which, like up here where we meet and talk with the mental health staff, the mental health holding cells are kind of right across the hall in these little cells. They're kind of unique. They're bright, they're relatively clean. There are working phones in them. So if you know somebody, you knew their home phone number, or if you knew you had memorized your phone calling card. I had never done that. I didn't even own a phone calling card. I never had any money while I was in jail. But if you had one and you could call home, or if you knew somebody who had a home number, which is increasingly difficult to do in this society, in American society, then you could call somebody. The other thing that was unique here is that all of the way that race had stratified, structured the way that interactions unfolded in most of the other general population housing units, that was not in play here. There was no deputies to enforce it. There were no higher status people to enforce it. So people just talked. It's like having a conversation with another human being about whatever it is you're experiencing. I remember the first time that I met with Nurse B, I sat in one of the little booths, and it was just barely wide enough for me to sit in it. I didn't think I was smaller then, but still, I think, not significantly smaller. So, but the booth makes you feel bigger than you really are. I sat in there and I noticed like cork board on either side, but I didn't sort of take note of it. And she and I just chatted. We chatted casually. She talked to me about what I was doing. She's like, "Hey, do you know what your out date is?" I was like, "Yeah, I know I have a release date. I don't know when it is." So she gave it to me, and I remember thinking, that's a kind thing to tell, like let me know like there's something to look forward to. And then we just talked, not about anything in particular. I told her that I can't sleep. And she said, "I'm going to give you a skill. It's like, I want you to lay still, and I want you to think about the muscles in your forehead." I still do this sometimes. Think about the muscles in your forehead and try to relax them. Then try to think about the muscles in your face and try to relax them. And work your way down, one arm, one leg, all the way down across your body until you relax your muscles. She said, "I don't have anything I can offer you regarding sleep other than this, but this will help you." And I remember thinking, thank you. And she asked me, "Do you want to see me again?" And I was like, yes. No one else in the jail is going to ask you if you want to do anything, by the way. So just her asking that, I didn't get the sense that I got the sense I could say no if I wanted to. She leaves, she gets out, she goes in the cell right next to me. As soon as she sits in the booth next to me, this guy launches into his nightmares. He's talking about drowning in blood. He's talking about dismembered bodies. And his voice is full of terror, for lack of a better way of describing it. He sounds afraid. She just listens to him. And she is not giving her a moment to get in on the conversation. And she listened to this man talk for a long time. And what struck me about this was I can hear everything he's saying too. I hear all of it. So everything that I had just said, he heard that. He knows my outdate, which is something you don't want people to know. But also I'm telling him I'm here because I can't sleep. He's here, he's having nightmares. She goes through the whole interaction. She listens to him. She gives him a kind ear. She gets up, she goes to the left. They're talking to this other guy. He starts off talking about phone time and other issues that he's having in the housing unit. And then he gets to talking about nightmares. He gets to start talking about dreams that he's having that are problematic. We leave out of there. We're sent across the hall to the back to the holding cells. There's this other giant of a man. I used to call him Paul Bunyan. Just 6'8", 6'9", super calm, really nice. He and I would talk, and he would talk about the terrible dreams he was having related to his wife and his children. And not that anything terrible had happened to them necessarily, but always that he was having nightmares that he couldn't save them, something was happening to them and he couldn't be there. And just what it meant. And I think part of the issue for him, what I gathered from, because I couldn't be too, I'm not conducting a real interview. I'm just having a conversation with another guy who's also in jail with me. And so what I gathered was that he was on the brink of losing his family because he was in jail. And he just experienced like all of this anxiety, all this shame and all this fear in relation to it all. But I went back to my holding cell and I didn't get any kind of like special medicine. No one had said, you're fixed. Here's what you got to do. So why go? Well, first, let me just note the fact that everybody's experiencing basically the same kinds of things is what was most interesting to me. Right? It had never occurred to me. I think Gary Allen Fine wrote an article about this, about sociology of dreams, like, towards the sociology of dreams. Very little has been done with this. But I hadn't read that article at the time. I just was experiencing this in my own life. But what I noted, of course, is that organizations have a way of homogenizing people and making us more and more the same. And the greater the degree of homogenization, the more you can find dreams starting to cluster. And what it showed me is that dreams are not uniquely personal. They're not just yours. They are tied to the social context in which you live. This is why you'll get people who live in war-torn countries having similar kinds of dreams. This is why you'll find people who in certain kinds of cultural and organizational contexts having similar kinds of dreams. In fact, the only thing that you can get from going to mental health is phone time and camaraderie. And the camaraderie is mostly about the types of dreams and nightmares that you're having. But it's not unique to what I experienced. What I experienced in jail is not the only place you're going to get this kind of experience. So yes, these are the themes that I experienced there. But I also conducted a study with law enforcement in a large Midwestern state. And here's the dreams that they're reporting. Dreams of, I went to a call, I didn't have my weapon. Right? I had this nightmare, I had my weapon out, it jammed, right? Or I couldn't even get there. These are people reported, I'm talking about from people who are the low level, like troopers who are like on the ground versus the lieutenants and the captains, everybody having a similar kind of set of dreams. I also started a set of interviews with OBGYNs. And this is their set of dreams that they talk about. This idea that there's a baby that's stuck, I can't get the baby out. This is the most common one that I heard, stuck baby, right? Missing instruments. A lot of doctors report that in general, but especially with OB. I haven't interviewed all the doctors, just a set of OBGYNs. Or the idea that because you're on call that you have to go. Now in some hospital systems, you're already there. So you do on call while you're in the hospital. In other cases, you're at home and you go. But to the extent that you're at home and you have to go, you can't get there. You can't get through traffic. You've been stopped somehow by a train or by police or by traffic, whatever the case, your car won't start. But the larger point here is that there's something unique about the organizational context with regard to dreams. So this is what I have for you all today. I want you all to think more deeply about what it may mean and maybe think about the kinds of dreams that our kinds of institutions shape for us. It's not clear to me yet how much more I'll do with this. We'll see as I'm still analyzing the data from the law enforcement study. But it is kind of fascinating to me that there is this social aspect to the dreams that we have. Thank you.